the Tinder-Box. A soldier came marching along the highway. Right, left, right, left. He had his knapsack on his back and his sword by his side, for he had been to the wars and was now returning home. And on the road he met an old witch, a horrid-looking creature she was, her lower lip hanging down almost to her neck, and she was waddling like an old limp rag. "Good evening, soldier," she said. "What a bright sword and what a large knapsack you have. You really do look like a soldier. I tell you what, you shall have as much money of your own as you could wish for." "Thank you very much, old witch," said the soldier. The witch now pointed to a large tree that stood close to the wayside and said, "Do you see this tree? It is quite hollow within. Climb up to the top, and you will find a hole large enough to creep through. Then tie a cord around your waist, and thus let yourself down to the trunk through that hole. If you want to come up again, all you have to do is call for me." "But what am I to do down in the tree?" asked the soldier. "What are you to do?" said the witch. "Why, fetch money, to be sure. As soon as you get to the bottom of the tree, you will find yourself in a wide passage lit by more than 300 lamps. Then you will see 3 doors. You can't open them. The keys are in the locks. On entering the first room, you will see in the middle of it a dog seated on a chest. His eyes are as large as teacups, but never you mind. Just go briskly up to him and set him down on this apron of mine. Once that is done, you can open the chest and take out as much money as you please. But the chest only contains copper coins. If you should like silver better, all you have to do is walk into the next room. There you will find a chest and a dog on it with eyes as large as mill wheels. But do not be afraid of him. You only have to set him down on my apron and then rifle through the chest at your leisure. But if you would rather have gold, you can have that too, as much as you can carry, if you walk into the third chamber. The dog that sits on this money chest has eyes as large as a church tower. But do not be alarmed. Just set him down on my apron, and he will do no harm. And you can take as much from the chest as you like." "Not a bad plan," said the soldier. "But how much of the money am I to give you, old woman?" "Not a penny do I want," returned the witch. "The only thing I would like you to bring me is an old tinder-box which my grandmother left there by mistake the last time she was down in the tree." "All right, then," said the soldier. "Come and tie the rope around my waist." "Here it is," said the witch, "and here is my blue apron." And the soldier climbed the tree and let himself down inside. Here he found everything exactly as the witch had said. The passage was lit by more than 300 lamps, and behind the first door there was a dog who stared at him with eyes as large as teacups. "There's a good boy," he said, as he spread the witch's apron before him and lifted the dog upon it. Then he helped himself to as many coppers as he could carry in his pockets. He shut the lid and put the dog back and walked to the second room. There, if you please, sat the dog with eyes as large as millstones. "Don't stare at me so," remarked the soldier. "It might weaken your eyesight." And with these words he set the dog down on the witch's apron. But when, on raising the lid of the chest, he beheld a vast quantity of silver contained, he threw all the coppers away and filled his pockets and knapsack with pure silver. Then he entered the third room. What a terrifying sight! That dog indeed had a pair of eyes as large as a church tower, and they kept rolling around and around. "Good evening," said the soldier, and raised his cap respectfully. For such a monster of a dog as this he had never seen before or heard in his life. He stood still for a moment, looking at him. Then, thinking the sooner it is done, the better, he lifted the creature from his box and set him down on the apron and opened the chest. What a lot of gold there was! Hastily, the soldier threw out all the silver money he'd stuffed in his pockets and took the gold instead. Now he had enough money for a lifetime. He put the dog back onto the chest and opened the door behind him and called at the tree. "Now, pull me up again, old witch." "Have you got the old tinderbox?" asked the witch. "Oh, sorry, I've quite forgotten it," shouted the soldier, and he went back to fetch it. The witch then pulled him up through the tree, and there was the highway. His pockets, knapsack, and cap, and even boots were stuffed with gold. "Now, tell me what you're going to do with the tinderbox," said the soldier. "That is no concern of yours," said the witch. "You have got your money. Now give me the tinderbox this instant." "Well, take your choice," said the soldier. "Either you tell me at once what the tinderbox is for, or I draw my sword and cut off your head." "I won't tell you!" screamed the witch, and her lower lip trembled. So the soldier drew his sword and cut off her head, and there she lay. But he did not waste time looking at what he had done. He knotted all the money securely in the witch's apron, and took the bundle on his back, and put the tinderbox into his pocket, and went straight for the nearest town. It was a large, handsome town, a city, in fact. He walked into the first hotel of the place, and asked for the best rooms and ordered the choicest and most expensive dishes for his supper, for now he was a rich man with plenty of gold to spend. The servant who had to clean his boots, however, could not help thinking they were disgracefully shabby and worn to belong to such a grand gentleman. But early the soldier went out to buy himself new clothes and boots. He had now become a very great man indeed, and people told him of all the places of amusement in the city, and of their king, and his beautiful daughter, the princess. "I would rather like to see her," said the soldier. "Well, no one can see her," was the reply. "She lives in a large palace made of copper, surrounded by many walls and towers. No one but the king may go and visit her there, because it has been foretold that she will marry a common soldier, and our king would not like that." "I'd like to see her now more than ever," thought the soldier, who could not obtain permission. And now he started on his very gay life, went to the theater and opera, and drove out to the royal gardens, gave a lot of money to the poor, because he knew how hard poverty can be. He always gaily dressed, and had a crowd of friends who declared he was the most capital fellow on account of all his money. But as he was giving and spending every day, and never receiving anything in return, his money began to run out, and in the end he only had 2 pence, and was obliged to leave the splendid apartment where he had lodged hitherto, and take refuge in a little attic chamber where he had to brush his boots and darn his clothes himself, and where none of his friends ever came to see him because there were so many stairs to go up. It was a very dark evening, and he could not afford to buy himself so much as a candle. All at once he remembered that there were a few matches lying in the tinder-box that the witch had asked him to fetch out of the hollow tree. So he brought it out and began to strike a light. But no sooner had he rubbed the flintstone to make the sparks fly out, the door burst open, and the dog with the eyes as large as teacups who stood before him and said, "Who commands my master for his slave?" "What is that?" said the soldier. It seemed a strange tinderbox. He struck it once, and the dog appeared to have guarded the copper coins. If he struck it twice, in came the dog with the silver. If he struck it 3 times, he was at once attended by the monstrous guardian of the golden treasure, and they brought him money and everything he wished for. So the soldier removed back to the princely apartment and brought himself an entirely new suit of clothing, and presently his friends turned up again. There were no stairs to climb when they wanted to see him now. One day it occurred to him that it was utterly strange that no one should be allowed to see the princess. What a waste of her beauty it was that she should be cooped up between copper walls. So he struck his tinderbox once, and lo and behold, there was the dog with his eyes the size of teacups. "It is rather late at night, I must admit," said the soldier, "but I would like to see the princess if for only 1 minute." The dog was out the door in a flash, and before the soldier had time to think, he had returned with the princess sitting asleep on his back. and she was so enchantingly beautiful that everyone knew immediately she was a princess. The soldier knelt down and kissed her hand. The dog ran back to the palace with the princess that very minute. However, the next morning, while she was at breakfast with the king and queen, she said that she had a very strange dream from the previous night. She had dreamt that she was riding a dog, an enormously large dog, and the soldier had knelt down to her and kissed her hand. Pretty sort of dream indeed, said the queen, and she insisted that one of the ladies in waiting at the court should watch the princess's bedside during the following night to make sure that she was really only dreaming. The soldier had longingly exceeded to see the fair princess of the Copper Palace again, so accordingly, next evening he summoned the dog once more to fetch her. So he did, and ran as fast as he could. The lady in waiting, however, put on her boots and ran after them as fast as she could. When she saw the dog disappearing into a large house, she took out a piece of chalk and made a big white cross on the door to be able to find the house again the next day. Then she went home and betook herself to rest. But on his way back, the dog chanced to observe the white cross on the door of the hotel where the soldier lived. So he immediately took another piece of chalk and made crosses on every door throughout the town. Early in the morning, out came the king and queen, waiting, and all the officers of the household, to see where the princess had been. Here it is, said the king when he first saw the first white cross. No, it is there, said the queen, and pointed to a second door. No, this is sure. Why, there's a cross too. They all cried together, discovering that there were crosses on all the doors. So they gave up their search. But the queen was exceedingly wise and imprudent. She took her golden scissors and cut a long piece of silk material into strips as she made them into a neat little bag. The bag she filled with fine buckwheats and tied it to the princess's waist. She had, however, cut a hole in the bag, just large enough to let the seeds drop out gradually all the time the princess was moving. That evening the dog came again and took the princess on his back and ran away with her to the soldier. The soldier, who was still fond of her and wished he were a prince, so as to be able to marry her. The dog never noticed how the seeds went tripping all the way from the palace to the soldier's room, which he entered by the way of the window, climbing up that wall outside. So next morning the king and queen could easily discover where their daughter had been taken, and so they had the soldier arrested and cast into prison. And now he was in prison, and it was dark and boring there, and the guard kept coming in to remind him that tomorrow he was to be hanged. Unfortunately, the soldier had left the tinderbox on the table in his room. When morning came through the narrow iron grafting in his window, he could watch the people hurrying along to see him hanged. He could hear the drums beating and the soldiers marching in the place of the execution. The crowd was rushing along, and the shoemaker's apprentice, with his leather apron and slippers, ran with such speed that one of his slippers flew off and bounded against the wall behind which the soldier was sitting, looking out from between the staves. Stop, shouted the soldier. You don't have to be in such a hurry. If you want to make a little money, go to my lodgings and fetch me the tinderbox which I left on the end of the table. I'll give you 2 pence, but you have to get a move on. The shoemaker's boy raced to the aid and fetched the soldier's tinderbox. Outside the city, the gallows had been erected. Round it were marshaled the soldiers with thousands of people, men, women, and children. The king and queen were seated in magnificent thrones opposite the judges and the assembled council. The executioner was on the point of fitting the rope around the soldier's neck when, turning to the majesties, he asked to be granted one last favor, to smoke a pipe of tobacco. The king could not refuse this harmless request. Accordingly, the soldier took out his tinderbox and struck the flint once, twice, 3 times. And lo, all the 3 wizard dogs were standing before him. Now help me, and don't let me get hanged, said the soldier, and forthwith the dogs fell upon the judges and counselors, and tossing them highly into the air till they fell down on the ground again. They were all badly hurt. Don't touch me, shouted the king, but the monster dog with the large eyes, as large as the church tower, seized both him and the queen, and flung them up in the air with the counselors. And the soldiers and people were frightened and shouted out with one voice, good soldier, you shall be our king, and the beautiful princess shall be your wife and our queen. Then they put the soldier in the royal carriage, and all the three dogs bounded to and fro in front and shouted, "Hurrah!" The little boys whistled, and the guards presented arms. The princess was sent for and made queen, which she liked much better than living as a prisoner in the copper palace. The bridal festivities lasted for 8 whole days, and the three dogs sat at the banqueting table staring at them about with their big eyes.